Hello everyone, how are you? I hope you're all having a good day today. So today we're gonna look at a chapter, Communicating for Success. Okay, this is in the Understanding Human Communication book. Um, One of the things that's really kind of goes underserved sometimes is understanding some of the skill set, and these are what are called soft skills that you need in order to achieve success in the workplace. Um, it kind of, you think, oh, well, I just need to be a good communicator. Oh, I just need to listen. Oh, I need to do this or I need to do that. Oh, I'm really good at that. Are you? Have you worked on it? When was the last time you ever thought about increasing your communication skills? What did you do? What did you listen to? What are some of the strategies you use? Well, I'm just a good listener. Really, what makes you say that? Because other people say it? Have you trained to be a good listener? And so, it becomes one of those things where you're like, you know what? I do. And, CEOs, presidents of industry, major people in this society actually go through training of sorts to become better communicators, both as the speaker and as the listener. So it really is important that we sort of understand how important communication is for career success. Now, setting the stage for career success. Being a good communicator can develop a good reputation in the workplace. If they know that you're a person that can communicate effectively, that can get the message across, that is able to tell people what they can and cannot do in a way that doesn't sound defensive or derogatory, that's an asset. That is someone who's able to really work within the scope of the company mission statement. And that's really important. You also have to be careful about managing your identity online. Who are the people that can see you? What do they see? Some of the strategies for that is showcase your strengths and goals. People sometimes put that on LinkedIn, which is a great place for you to sort of build an online identity. Um, you want to build a professional identity online. Obviously, LinkedIn is just an example. Careful with embarrassing posts. You want to make sure that people see the best of you, not the worst. And there's ways of controlling what you post, obviously, but what other people are posting about you, so that you're not tagged, and other people can then see you being tagged on somebody else's feed. You want to monitor your online presence. What websites are you visiting? Who are you talking to? Can that be tracked? All that information is important, especially, and I hope it's not, when you're using company computers. Um, Careful to do damage control. Once you figure out that something's wrong, that doesn't something seem right, do damage control. Figure out what it is that was wrong, fix that, and then if there's anybody or anyone that saw it that isn't supposed to see it, make sure that you talk to them and you're honest about what happened and what you did to fix it. You want to be aware of mistaken identities. Sometimes people will have your same name, and when people see them, they'll think it's you. So be careful about it. Don't be scared off, and don't stop when you get hired, right? Make sure that you are always maintaining your profile when you get hired. And just because you may have some warnings and you want to avoid by and you want to avoid that altogether, there's nothing wrong with having a social presence, but just kind of be aware of what people see and what you do. Now, in in cultivating a professional network, when you're talking about a professional network or networking, as they say, it's really the idea that you find like-minded individuals that are kind of pursuing similar things that you are or have already pursued them, and you have them as a reference to be able to ask for advice for whatever it is you got to do. Now, these people don't just fall in your lap. A lot of times these are done through shared groups. These are done through networking groups. These are done through social groups. These are done through professional groups. These are done through going to seminars. The idea here is you want to sort of start building by actually being the person who goes out and really makes an effort to meet people. Now, in doing this, why do we do it? Well, for a lot of us, we do it because we want to pursue the job that we want. What do we want to do and how do we get there? One, prepare the application materials. What are all the information that you're going to need in order to apply for that job you're applying to? What are the certificates that you need? What are the dates and information, phone numbers that you need? A lot of times when you fill in an application, you need phone numbers for past companies, their addresses. You need to have the information of the managers that you had at the moment. All those things. And if you're constantly looking for those things over and over again, it doesn't do you much good. You always want to make sure that you have all the application materials set and ready to go. Plan for the job interview. A lot of times people go in with a job interview without really paying much close attention to what you're applying for. Do your research. A lot of times we put a lot of, I remember having this conversation in class where I asked somebody, when was the last time, who was the last person to go on vacation? And that person would sort of raise their hand. It's like, oh, where'd you go? And they'll say, oh, we went Hawaii, we went to Arizona, whatever. And I was like, oh, really? How long did it take for you to plan? Oh, like a year ago or 6 months. Oh, wow. What exactly did you search? Blah, blah, blah. We did this, we did that. And they give me this entire thing of what they went through to plan a really nice vacation that in some cases is only a couple of days, a week, maybe 2 weeks, right? And then I ask, okay, well, who here has applied for the job? And then, raise your hand. How much did you prepare to apply for that job? And it's usually, there's a rare exception, but it's usually not as much research, not as much time. So it's like, that's interesting because the job, which could have a lifelong impact in your life, your income, your family's income, something that could really have an effect on you, you're not putting in as much effort as a vacation. Why? We have to kind of change our mentality a little bit. The other thing too is you want to make sure that you prepare a good resume. Make sure you have a good cover letter. I forgot to mention that in preparing for a job application. Every job application should have its own cover letter and its own resume. Now, I'm not talking about completely different, but you got to tweak a few things to match what you're going after. Okay. Make sure that you practice for some of the questions they're going to ask you. A lot of us already know what they're going to ask us, and if you don't know, all you have to do is Google questions they're going to ask at a, I don't know, Starbucks interview, and all these questions will appear. You have to be ready to answer those questions. The more you fumble, the less confident you look. You want to be honest, but you also want to seem prepared. Okay. In participating for the job interview, you want to make sure that you dress appropriately, mind your manners, follow the interviewer's lead. How far do they want to take the interview? Are they being sort of very casual or very formal? Either way, follow their lead. If they're being casual, you can be casual. If they're being very formal with you, you can be formal. So kind of think about that. There's a couple of other things here, like follow up after the interview, ask good questions of your own. We've kind of talked about that in the past. And then what are some of the questions behind the questions? If someone's asking you what makes you better than any other candidate that's there, or what's your greatest weakness, what is it that they're trying to get from you? Are they trying to measure like really what makes you better, or are they trying to see if maybe you're a little bit narcissistic, a little bit selfish? Do you have an ego, right? So it's sort of the question behind the question. So that's important too. Now, if you get the job, or if some of you already have jobs, well, what does organizational communication factors come in? Well, those are the things that sort of determine how well you communicate in the job when you already have it. You have to understand what's the culture of the workplace. Is it one where everybody talks to each other? Is it a situation where here it talks about acculturation, which is the process of adapting to a culture? Do you have to sort of adapt the way that you sort of act and interact and speak with people with the company? Sociogram is a graphic representation of the interaction between patterns in the group. In other words, how do people interact with each other? And while a lot of people say, oh yeah, we all just get along, it's not always the case. There's always separation of groups, not necessarily on purpose per se from a negative standpoint, but a lot of times when you have a group of people who have sort of a set goals or duties, they tend to focus a little bit more on themselves because they all share the same goal and duties for that particular department. So you have to kind of be careful about that. Obviously, you also want to make sure that you understand how people communicate. We have a couple terms here like the all-channel network. We have the chain network. We have the wheel network. We have the gatekeepers, and we have the power. Those are things that you have to sort of determine as how people communicate within the workplace. I'm going to let you sort of look into some of those terms yourself, because at the end of the day, you still got to read the chapter. But just know that it really is sort of an understanding of how the information flows. Is it one of those things where the boss says something and then everything kind of goes down to the respective departments? Or is it sort of bouncing up and down, right? Where you have maybe team meetings where an individual from each department shows up. Well, what kind of communication do they have? And you have to be able to sort of understand the interaction and the patterns within. And then you've got power in the workplace. Now, power is sort of interesting because you've got legitimate power, which is really the ability to influence other people. And a lot of times that comes from being like the owner or their official position, like the CEO. And then you have expert power. And expert power comes from the idea that you know what you're talking about because you're an expert in that field. Then you have connection power, which is the ability to influence others based on having relationships with other people. So maybe you know the boss personally. Let's say you golf with them, or you do something socially with them. Well, because you know them and you have sort of that connection, you then become sort of important because someone can talk to you, and then you can talk to them. You have reward power, which is you can reward others by promising rewards for something that they do, or consequences if they don't do it. Coercive power, which is your ability to influence others by threatening or imposing unpleasant consequences. Referent power, which is the ability to influence others by virtue of being liked or respected. And a lot of times that's really cool when you talk about referent power because people like you for what you know and who you are, not necessarily for the power that you have, but for the power within you as a person. So now we have that, we go to communicating in a professional environment. One, avoid common communication mistakes. Never make fun of other people. It's really bad when you do that, and chances are in the workplace, it's going to come back to you. Don't overshare information. Be careful that this is a workplace. This isn't necessarily a social atmosphere, so too much information of you may not necessarily be great. Don't gossip. Always do your best. Remain calm and don't fixate on mistakes. Always make sure that you're always moving forward. Yeah, people make mistakes, but do you stay focused on them or do you move forward and try to find solutions? Communicate well as a follower. People sometimes say, well, you have to be a communicator, a good communicator as a leader. Yes, but a lot of times we start off as followers and we have to start off as a good communicator as a follower. A lot of time we have people who are bystanders, who are followers, who are aware of what's going on around them, but tend to hang back and watch rather than play in the active role. So bystanders are people who are just sort of on the side looking at what's going on. Participants are people who moderately are involved in the process of what's going on in the work environment. Activists are followers who are energetic and passionately engaged in what's going on in the communication. And diehards who will sometimes literally sacrifice themselves for the team. These are people who do whatever it takes, right? Now, you always also want to make sure that you communicate in a professional manner online. Take part in training. Find out what proper communication is online. Some of you may think, oh, I already know. Do you? What's proper training in communication? How do you respond to something? How can you sound assertive in typing it out and not sound mean or belittling, right? There's sort of a fine line there. Develop camaraderie. Make sure that you build not necessarily friendships, but coworkers have relationships. You know, are we all trying to achieve the same goal? Use correct grammar, spelling, and punctuation. That's really important. Even though this is an English class, I do expect certain levels of competency with the English language. And don't be too brief. Now, I myself fall sort of a victim to that because as you know, with my emails, I can be very succinct and I could be very short with my responses to you as my students. But this isn't necessarily a work environment. This is a student environment. But I could tell you that when it comes to my colleagues, my peers, certainly the dean in the office, I give really robust responses. And as my students, if you need a robust response, I can make sure that I take the time to write something that really reflects the needs that you have. But if it's a case where obviously where I can be short, I will. But this one actually falls on me right there where it says don't be too brief. Think before hitting forward or reply all. Reply all is some of the worst things that people do. A lot of times I've seen emails where somebody replies all and they send a personal message, but everybody can see it. be careful with that. Don't convey sensitive information. A lot of times sending something electronically, especially if it's really sensitive, may not be the best way. Sometimes person-to-person communication is better. Dress for the camera. People can see what you are doing in a professional environment. So you want to make sure you do the best thing possible, depending on the situation that you're at. If you're in an office environment, for example, in a corporate office, you always want to make sure you're presentable. If you can get away with being in a t-shirt, hello, you probably could, but it's a different situation. So you have to make sure that you dress appropriately for what you're doing. And then pay attention. One of the worst things in the world, especially when you're doing stuff online, is when you're actually speaking and trying to share something, and then everybody who's online viewing isn't even paying attention to you. So as you notice, as a speaker, I'm always asking questions, asking if you understand, saying to you, heads up, give me a thumbs up or nod your head, and that lets me know that you're still being in tune with what I'm doing here. All right. So, anyways, that's the chapter. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's one of those things where I think that it could be a very beneficial to you. And if you ever have any questions about that, you're always welcome to reach out. I'm right here for you. All right. Bye, everybody.